That woman is dead right now.
Brought them.
She was stabbed more than 100 times. And then the building goes on fire, and not to mention your baby's mom, your children, bro. Your children.
Midnight, Bevel Road, Daytona Beach. Smoke pours from the windows of a ground floor apartment. Flames climb fast. Neighbors are already outside. Phones up, watching a building they thought they knew. Firefighters push toward the door. Inside, 3 children. One of them, not even a year old. The door won't open, it's locked. Then someone notices something on the ground just outside the frame. A set of keys, not dropped, not lost. Placed there. Whoever locked this door walked out and left the only way in, sitting on the concrete behind them. It's the middle of the night wherever this family is sleeping. And it might be the middle of the night where you are too. Tell me your city in the comments. I want to see how far this one travels. This is a real case, real people. What happened inside that apartment is disturbing. And some of what's ahead may be hard to hear. If you need to step away at any point, that's okay. Officers force the door open. Smoke fills the hallway. A woman is found inside. She won't survive. In the next room, a crib. A 10-month-old boy pulled out by rescue crews, still breathing. He won't make it through the night either. 2 more children are found and carried out. 4 years old, 5 years old. Both alive, both critical. Once the fire is out, investigators walk the scene. The stove in the kitchen, all 4 burners turned on. Burned paper stacked on top. This fire didn't start itself, and that door was never supposed to open from the inside. Someone planned that. The question is who? Denja Moore was 30, raising 3 children in an apartment on Bevel Road. A 10-month-old son, a 4-year-old daughter, a 5-year-old. That apartment was hers. Legal custody of her 2 older children belonged to her, not to their father. It was her home, her name on the lease, her children under her roof. Beyond that, little is publicly known about who Denja Moore was outside of being their mother. No detailed record of her job, her friendships, or her life outside those walls has surfaced. What's known is simpler, and it's what mattered most to 3 kids. She was their mom. Charles Ivy was 34, the father of at least 2 of the children, including the baby boy. Though Moore held custody, Ivy was still the father the 2 younger children knew. He wasn't a stranger to the criminal justice system. Years earlier, in 2015, he'd been charged with driving on a suspended license. In 2016, a battery charge. Neither made him a public name. Neither predicted what was coming. Ivy worked at a restaurant nearby. On the evening of November the 20th, co-workers say he was on shift, doing his job like any other night. Around 10 o'clock, he clocked out. People who knew him described something almost mundane about his habits. He didn't like the way his clothes smelled after work, so he'd take them off before going inside. A small, private routine, the kind of detail no one thinks twice about until it matters. That night, by every account, started like any other. He left work the way he always did, got in his vehicle, but he didn't go home. Somewhere between 10 o'clock and midnight, something changed. The fire at the countryside apartments broke out just after midnight. 2 hours. That's the entire distance between a man clocking out of an ordinary shift and a building on Bevel Road going up in flames. 2 hours nobody could yet account for. And somewhere inside that gap, everything changed. Fire marshal investigators returned once the flames were out. Their job was simple: figure out how this fire started and where. The answer wasn't simple at all. The blaze hadn't started in one place. It had started in 2. One point of origin was the kitchen. The other was the bedroom. The same room where Denja Moore was found. 2 separate fires set inside the same home, close together in time. To investigators, that told its own story. A fire that spreads does one thing. A fire lit twice was built to do another. They began mapping the night hour by hour. What they already knew from the scene lined up with what they were now finding in the burn pattern. Every new detail pointed the same direction. Not panic, planning. Then the medical examiner's report came back. and it reshaped the entire case. Denja Moore did not die in the fire. She was already dead before the first flame was lit. Her death was ruled a homicide, caused by sharp force injury, not smoke, not burns. She was gone before the apartment ever caught fire, which means the fire wasn't the crime itself. It came after 2 fires, a body already lifeless before either one started. Investigators now had a harder question than who died first or how. It was what that fire was built to destroy, and whether whatever it was meant to hide had survived the flames at all. Inside, firefighters and Officer Carlos Quellis moved through near zero visibility, heat rolling through the hallway in waves. All 3 children were found alive and rushed straight to paramedics outside. Only Denja Moore and her infant son had been stabbed. The 2 older children hadn't been touched that way. Their injuries came entirely from what came after. The smoke, the heat, being left inside a home built to burn around them. At the hospital, the 10-month-old's body couldn't recover from what the fire had done to him. He suffered a cardiac event brought on by thermal and inhalation injury. He died there, hours later. The 4-year-old and the 5-year-old were airlifted to a hospital in Gainesville, more than an hour from home. Both were placed on ventilators, intubated, kept alive by machines while doctors worked to stabilize them. No one could yet say how long recovery would take, or what the smoke and heat had cost them long term.
With what we witnessed throughout this investigation, the defendant in this incident deserves a special place in the gates of hell for what he did to this mother and these children. Again, I have never witnessed anything this horrific in my entire career.
Police Chief Jakari Young stood before reporters afterward and gave credit where he believed it belonged. He said plainly that without the fire crews who went in when they did, the 4- and 5-year-old would not have survived. 3 children were carried out of that apartment. 2 of them would go on living. Their mother was gone. Their baby brother was gone. And their father, the man who shared that home with them, was not there. Not at the apartment. Not at the hospital. Somewhere else when everyone else was looking for him. Investigators had one more stop to make that night. Someone needed to tell Charles Ivy his children were in the hospital. They couldn't reach him, not by phone, not at his door. By the next day, Daytona Beach investigators still hadn't made contact. They asked officers in Ormond Beach, where Ivy lived, to try instead. That's when he was found, outside his home, loading suitcases and bags into an SUV. Investigators noticed an injury to his leg, a cut on his hand, fresh. Ivy had an explanation ready. He said he'd hurt himself removing a fender from a trailer. But hours earlier, a manager who'd worked beside him at the restaurant said he'd shown no injury at all. No limp, nothing.
If those statements were to be said over and over and over again from law enforcement or the head law enforcement officer, I could see where the defense then could be concerned. But a 2-sentence quote in an article one time, I do not find as prejudicial.
Judge Leah Case reviewed the interview herself. In her ruling, she found that despite the girl's age, she communicated with real maturity and told the truth as she understood it. Her statements would be allowed. By then, prosecutors had already filed formal notice that they'd seek the death penalty. In it, they laid out what they believed made this case different. A history of threats of violence. Crimes committed, they argued, to avoid arrest and escape accountability. Acts they described as especially heinous, atrocious, and cruel. Carried out, in their words, in a cold, calculated, and premeditated manner, without any pretense of justification. Ivy's trial is scheduled for September. A jury may hear a 4-year-old describe what she says happened to her mother, alongside a prosecution asking for the harshest sentence the law allows. Whether they believe her and what that means for Charles Ivy is still unknown. Denja Moore was 30 years old, a mother of 3. Before any of this, she was simply that, a mother, in an apartment on Bevel Road, raising her kids. Her son was named Messiah. He was 10 months old. In the short time he had, he was held. He was fed. He was somebody's whole world. Her daughter and her other son survived that night. 4 years old, 5 years old. They lived through something their mother didn't, and they carry pieces of it now. Pieces no child should have to carry. What's true is simple, and it was true long before any of this happened. Denja Moore raised her children in that apartment, on that street, in an ordinary life. She was their mother. Her name was Denja Moore. Detectives had already begun retracing his movements that night, using traffic cameras and license plate readers around the apartment complex. What they found placed him at Denja Moore's apartment around 11 o'clock. He stayed inside for 15 to 20 minutes. Then he didn't leave. He sat in the parking lot for another 30 minutes before finally driving away. 15 minutes inside. 30 minutes sitting outside in his car in the dark at the apartment where hours later a fire would be set in 2 separate rooms. No one has explained what happened in that time. Not yet. By the time detectives caught up with Ivy, his movements were already mapped in detail. What was new was this. The same cameras that placed him arriving now placed him leaving. Right around the time the fire started, he was there. The cameras made that much certain. When investigators searched him, they found something else. Denja Moore's cell phone, in his possession. Not lost, not left behind. With him. Officers stopped him during a traffic stop soon after. He agreed to go in for formal questioning. But at that roadside stop, when detectives sought his DNA, his clothing, and photographs of his injuries on the spot, he wouldn't cooperate. Chief Young later summed up what the evidence showed, regardless of what Ivy would or wouldn't say. Ivy hadn't confessed. He didn't need to. He had placed himself at the scene around the time investigators believed the murders happened. Eventually, a statement did come. Ivy admitted he'd been at the apartment complex that night. That much, he didn't deny. But he denied everything else. He said he had nothing to do with the fire and nothing to do with what happened to Denja Moore or her children. Investigators asked if he could think of anyone who'd want to hurt her. Anyone with a reason. He said no. Not a single person came to mind. Then the medical examiner's full findings came back. Denja Moore had been stabbed more than 99 times. Wounds across her neck, her torso, her extremities. That finding sat beside everything else investigators had gathered. His presence at the scene, confirmed by camera after camera. Her phone in his possession. His refusal to hand over evidence the moment they asked for it. Whatever that fire had been set to destroy, it hadn't worked. The evidence survived it. His words offered no suspect, no explanation for any of it. The evidence offered a timeline, a phone in his hands, and a body that told its own story. Charles Ivy was charged. 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder, arson. From here, the case moved toward trial, where a jury would eventually have to decide which version of that night to believe. After the fire, the surviving children were placed in the custody of their maternal grandfather. It was there that the 4-year-old began to talk. Her grandfather said she described her father hurting her mother outside, and that Denja had tried to run. Investigators arranged a forensic interview. In it, the girl said her mother was in heaven now, and that her father was the one who killed her. She said there was a fire, that they were locked inside, that her mother and father were trying to kill each other, and her father was the first to reach for a knife. Asked why she thought her mother was attacked, her answer was simple. She said her father didn't like her mother anymore. Ivy's defense team pushed back. They argued the interview happened months after the killings, that she seemed more interested in playing with toys than answering questions, that parts of her account didn't line up with the known facts, including a detail about police arriving at the scene while Ivy was actually arrested elsewhere, hours later. Prosecutors argued she understood exactly what she was saying and asked the court for permission to call her as a witness at trial.